You've heard it 1,000 times. Every gun sale needs a background check, no exceptions. Well, that's not exactly true anymore. In a rare move that's flying way under the radar, the Department of Justice just gave gun owners in 13 states a serious shortcut. No NICS background check required? Sounds too good to be true? It's not. And it's not a loophole either. Today, we're breaking down a federal policy shift that most folks, even seasoned gun buyers, haven't heard about. It's clean, it's legal, and it could save you serious time at the counter if you live in the right state and hold the right permit. We're also covering what qualifies, what doesn't, and what it means for the future of background checks. Let's get into it. Part 1. The ATF quietly changed the rules. In May 2025, the ATF dropped an open letter that quietly changed how background checks work in 13 states. No media coverage, no big splash, just a quiet shift buried in formal language, but the impact is real. Here's what changed. If you live in one of those 13 states and have a valid permit issued within the last 5 years, and that permit was granted after a full background check, then your permit can now substitute for the usual NICS check when buying from an FFL. That means no extra call, no hold, no delay. You still fill out the 4,473 and follow all standard procedures, but the extra background step? It's skipped because you already passed it. This doesn't replace any legal requirements. It just cuts out the duplicate check for responsible folks who've already been vetted. For both buyers and dealers, that means smoother, faster sales. Just make sure your permit qualifies, not all do, even within the approved states. And if it's expired or doesn't meet the criteria, you're back to the standard process. What's especially surprising is how quietly this policy went into effect. No press conferences, no breaking headlines, it was essentially a memo, but one that could save thousands of people hours of delay and frustration. This also highlights how complex and misunderstood gun regulations can be, even among experienced buyers. Many assume that all permits are the same, or that federal rules override everything. But this policy proves that when state systems are built right, they can sync with federal ones to create something smoother. That's rare and worth paying attention to. Part 2. Where this applies. So, which states cut? As of mid-2025, the following 13 states are approved: Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, Mississippi, Montana, North Dakota. These states have met the ATF's criteria by tying their permit systems to real, comprehensive background checks that meet or exceed the federal NICS standard. Some, like Michigan and Alabama, were added only after recent updates to their vetting processes. What's critical here is that inclusion on this list isn't political, it's procedural. It's about whether the state system is thorough, reliable, and current. If your state ensures that permits are issued only after proper vetting, and those permits are renewed within the required 5-year window, then you're likely in the clear. And this isn't just a list for now, it's a living policy. States can be added or removed based on how their systems evolve. So even if your state didn't cut this time, that could change if the legislature tightens the requirements and follows ATF guidance. The opportunity is there. Part 3. Not all permits qualify. Read that twice. Here's where it gets tricky. Not every CW permit from these 13 states qualifies. Only those issued within the last 5 years, and only those that meet the ATF's standard. If your state offers multiple types of permits, only some may be valid under this rule. A training-only or basic issuance permit may not meet the federal vetting threshold. If your permit skips mental health checks, criminal databases, or other disqualifiers, it won't count, no matter how pro-gun your state is. So check your issue date. Know what kind of permit you hold. If it's expired or was issued under looser criteria, you're back to the standard NICS check. No exceptions. If in doubt, ask your FFL. They'll know whether your permit qualifies and whether it can be used as a substitute. Also, if you've moved between states, make sure your current permit aligns with the state you're purchasing in. A valid permit from a qualifying state may not apply across state lines. This policy isn't designed for universal carry. It's strictly about streamlining same-state transactions for qualified buyers. Part 4. Why this matters. Anyone who's bought from an FFL knows how slow the NIC system can be, especially on weekends during peak seasons or when the system gets bogged down. A quick trip can turn into a waiting game with no clear end. This update doesn't erase the background check, it just avoids running it twice. If your state already did the vetting when it issued your permit, there's no reason to do it again. The feds are saying we're good with that. And for dealers, it's a major help. Less time on the phone, fewer delays, and happier customers who get to finish their purchase without a holdup. When things get busy, think holidays or hunting season. This small change makes a big difference. It's also a win for efficiency, for once federal and state systems are syncing up in a way that helps gun owners. Beyond that, it's also a rare example of administrative reform benefiting law-abiding citizens. Instead of new hurdles, this move trims the process without sacrificing security or oversight. That's a big deal in today's regulatory climate. Part 5. Not a loophole. Not even close. Let's clear something up. This policy isn't a workaround or a free pass. It's not skipping the rules, it's just streamlining what's already been done. If your permit was properly issued and meets federal standards, great, you're covered. But you still need to fill out the 4,473. You still need to meet every other requirement. And if your permit is expired or doesn't qualify, you'll go through the NICS process like everyone else. This isn't about cutting corners, it's about not repeating the same step twice. If you're unsure whether your permit counts, just ask your FFL. It's better to verify than to guess and risk unnecessary issues. In short, this change helps those who've already done things the right way. Nothing more, nothing less. And no, it's not a loophole, it's a streamlined system for those who've passed the tests already. And that distinction matters, because when opponents of Second Amendment rights start labeling this a loophole, it's important to push back with facts. This isn't about skipping steps, it's about not duplicating them. There's a difference. Part 6. The bigger picture. So why is this happening now? Because for years the legal option for states to substitute a permit for a background check already existed, it just wasn't being used consistently. The rules were there under federal law, but the ATF hadn't updated the list of qualifying states or permits in a long time. That's finally changed. With increased pressure to reduce delays and modernize the process, the Department of Justice directed the ATF to reevaluate which state permit systems are up to par. As a result, more states are now recognized as having permits that meet federal standards. Some of these states, like Michigan and Alabama, were added only recently, after their background check processes for permit issuance were closely reviewed and verified by the ATF. This isn't about a state's political stance, it's strictly about the process. If a state ties its concealed carry permits to a thorough NICS-level background check and ensures the permits are renewed every 5 years, it gets on the list. If not, it's left out. And if your state isn't on the list, it could be. All it takes is for the state to update its permitting system to include a full background check and follow the required criteria. This update is a sign that more cooperation between states and the federal system is possible. It sets the stage for smoother, more consistent firearm sales across the board. It's also a sign that advocacy works. The reason we're seeing this now is that gun owners, FFLs, and lawmakers pushed for clarity. They called out redundancy. They pointed to states that had solid systems but were being ignored. And finally, someone listened. That's the bigger picture here, not just policy change, but progress. Part 7. What FFL dealers need to know. This policy update affects not just buyers, but FFL holders as well. If you're a dealer, here's what matters. You can skip the NICS check only if the buyer presents a valid permit from one of the 13 approved states. That permit must be issued within the last 5 years, based on a full background check, including criminal and mental health screenings, tied to the state where the transfer is taking place. On Form 4473, the exemption is recorded in Question 21C. You'll need to document the permit type, issuing agency, and expiration date. If you're unsure the permit qualifies, it's safer to run the NICS check anyway. Remember, the FFL is still responsible. If the exemption is applied incorrectly, you could be held liable. Also, out-of-state permits don't qualify under this rule, even if they're from a listed state. In short, this change helps streamline the process, but only if applied carefully and correctly. Part 8. How states can qualify next. If your state isn't on the approved list yet, it doesn't mean it never will be. The ATF's list is not fixed. It can be updated as states improve their permitting systems. To qualify, a state must tie its concealed carry permits to a thorough background check that meets or exceeds federal NICS standards. That includes checks for criminal records, mental health disqualifiers, and other prohibited factors. Permits must also be valid for 5 years or less and subject to regular renewal. States with lifetime permits or those with weak vetting won't cut until reforms are made. Legislatures can act. By updating their permitting laws to align with ATF requirements, they can earn a spot on the list, just like Michigan and Alabama, which were added after tightening their background procedures. It's not about politics, it's about process. If the system is secure, current, and thorough, the ATF will recognize it. So if your state isn't included yet, there's a path forward. And if you care about streamlining your Second Amendment rights, that path starts with informed advocacy. Part 9. Common myths and misinformation. With any policy change, myths start spreading fast, and this one is no different. So let's clear up a few of the biggest misconceptions. Myth 1. This removes background checks. False. It only skips the second background check if you already passed one to get your permit. The vetting still happens, it's just not repeated. Myth 2, it's a loophole. Wrong again. The law has always allowed permit-based exemptions. The ATF is just updating which states qualify under existing federal standards. That's not a loophole, that's enforcement of a long-standing option. Myth 3, anyone with a permit can skip the NICS check. Not true. Only permits that meet strict criteria, recently issued, fully vetted, and from approved states are accepted. If your permit doesn't meet those standards, you still go through NICS. These myths often come from media outlets or anti-gun groups looking to stir fear or confusion. But the facts are simple. This is about reducing redundancy, not reducing oversight. Staying informed is how we push back with clarity and protect the rights that are being misrepresented. Final thoughts. If you're in one of those 13 states and your permit qualifies, you've just gained a smoother path to the counter. But this isn't automatic. Check your permit, make sure it's current, and understand your state's process. This move is rare an example of the system making things a little easier for responsible permit holders. Let's hope that continues. With more transparency, cooperation, and streamlined systems, this kind of reform could be just the beginning. Make sure to stay on top of changes in your state's policy. Just because you're covered today doesn't mean your state won't change its system next year. Staying informed is the best way to stay protected. If this breakdown helped, hit that like button, drop your state in the comments, and subscribe for more straightforward updates like this. Stay informed, stay sharp, and I'll